This video is brought to you by Ground News. When Assad's regime fell, one of the big open questions was what might happen to the de facto Kurdish state in the country's northeast. Originally, it looked like the Kurds might be safe. The new rebel government stressed their intentions to respect minority rights, and there were rumours of a US-mediated ceasefire between Turkish proxies and Kurdish forces along the Euphrates. However, in the past few days, Turkish proxies have resumed their attacks on Kurdish positions, and US officials told the Wall Street Journal that a buildup of Turkish troops along the Turkish-Syria border meant an invasion could be imminent. So, in this video, we're going to take a look at Turkey's long-standing feud with the de facto Kurdish state in northeast Syria, why they're apparently planning an invasion again, and what might happen next. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So, to understand why Turkey is apparently considering invading Syria, you need to understand how Syria is de facto split into two states. Basically, when the Syrian civil war kicked off in the early 2010s, Syria's Kurdish minority, who mostly live in the north of the country and have always wanted more political autonomy, took their chance and quickly announced the creation of a new independent state in Syria's northeast. This state was technically named the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, but is more commonly known as Rojava. Rojava isn't a Kurdish state per se. Its constitution commits to equality between all the region's ethnic groups, and it's not even clear if Kurds constitute an outright majority in the territory. But its military wing, the Syrian Democratic Forces or SDF, is mostly led by Kurdish forces, and the main political group in the region, the Democratic Union Party, is a Kurdish outfit. Now, the main political groups in Rojava insist they don't want to be independent. Rather, they want Rojava to be an autonomous region within a federal Syria, perhaps like the Kurdistan region in Iraq, and imagine their current governance structure as a model for all of Syria. But there's always been a sense that, unless they were offered a significant amount of autonomy, Rojava would resist being folded in to the rest of Syria. Anyway, Rojava's borders gradually expanded over the course of the war, in large part because the US allied with the SDF to push ISIS out of central Syria in 2017, and the SDF claimed this new territory for Rojava. Today, the SDF basically control all Syrian territory to the east of the Euphrates, plus a couple of cities on its western bank, including most notably Manbij and Deir ez-Zor. This made Turkey and Turkish President Recep Erdogan very anxious. This is because Turkey has long struggled with the Kurdish separatist movement in eastern Turkey, where some 20 million Kurds currently live. This really came to a head in the 80s, when the pro-independence Kurdish Workers' Party, commonly known as the PKK, started fighting an insurgency war against the Turkish state. The PKK lost relevance in the late 80s due to serial infighting and waning popularity amongst ordinary Kurds, but were rejuvenated by the creation of an autonomous Kurdish region in northern Iraq in 1991, which was facilitated by the establishment of a UN-backed no-fly zone over northern Iraq that year. Iraqi Kurdistan provided safe haven and inspiration for the PKK, and their insurgency resumed in earnest in the 2000s. Given the conflict has now lasted nearly 50 years and claimed over 40,000 lives, it should come as no surprise that the so-called Kurdish question is probably Turkey's #1 foreign policy priority. Anyway, Erdogan was understandably anxious that the creation of a Kurdish state on Turkey's southern border would both stoke Kurdish separatist sentiment inside Turkey and provide an operating base for Kurdish terror groups. This is why, in 2019, Turkey invaded Rojava to create a sort of buffer zone. And today, the Turkish state de facto controls two non-contiguous territories in northern Syria, where locals use the lira, civil servants are paid by the Turkish state, and electricity comes from southern Turkey's electricity grid. Turkey also supported rebel groups in northwestern Syria to fight against the Kurds. Turkey supported HTS, the rebel group that led the recent offensive that ousted Assad, but they actually provided even more support to another rebel group that was previously based in Idlib, called the Syrian National Army or SNA. The SNA today are essentially a Turkish proxy group, and their main job is to fight the Kurds. This is why when HTS was moving south from Aleppo towards Damascus, the SNA instead went east and attacked Kurdish forces in Manbij, one of the few Kurdish holdouts on the west of the Euphrates. Anyway, once it became clear that HTS and their leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jilani, had taken control over most of Syria, people started asking what would happen to Rojava. At first glance, it looked like Rojava might be safe. HTS and Jilani went to pains to stress that they wanted to respect the rights of Syria's minorities, and strongly implied that they would give Rojava at least some autonomy in this new Syria. However, even if HTS sounded relatively friendly, the SNA continued to attack Kurdish positions, who appealed to the US, which still has roughly 900 troops in northeastern Syria. The US tried to negotiate a deal with Turkey, which seemed to basically involve convincing the Kurds to withdraw to the east of the Euphrates in exchange for a ceasefire with Turkey and its proxies. But the messages have so far been mixed. While the Pentagon originally claimed that Turkey had agreed to, quote, prevent further escalation of an already volatile situation, as well as to avoid any risk to US forces and partners, SDF sources reported that the SNA had continued to assault Kurdish positions to the east of the Euphrates, notably around the town of Kobani, which sits just south of the Turkish border in between the two buffer zones. More worryingly, on Thursday, the Turkish Defense Ministry said there was no ceasefire deal, and that Turkey wouldn't negotiate with the SDF. At the same time, US officials reported that Turkey was amassing troops on the Turkey-Syria border, warning that a full-scale invasion could be, quote, imminent. So, what happens next? Well, as we see it, a Turkish invasion now looks relatively likely. Erdogan has proven willing to seize Syrian territory in the past, and the build-up looks similar to the one we saw in 2019, which ended with an invasion. The big question is really the extent of the invasion. Broadly speaking, there are two options available to Erdogan. The first option would be for Turkey to seize just enough territory to connect its two buffer zones and create a contiguous buffer zone in northern Syria. The second option, however, would be a full-scale invasion of Rojava to get rid of all Kurdish forces in the area, which is Erdogan's long-term strategic goal. As we see it, the first option is more likely at the moment, largely because Erdogan will probably wait for Trump for any full-scale assault, in the hope that Trump, who wasn't the biggest fan of the Kurds in his first term, will withdraw those 900 US troops who currently act as a sort of soft security guarantee for the Kurds. And it's not just in Syria where Trump's foreign policy will have a major impact. And keeping up with news is made much easier by Ground News, a website and app developed by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. They pull in stories from all over the world and organise them by story. And every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of all the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. For instance, take the story of Trump inviting Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán to the US to meet with himself and Elon Musk. That story has been covered extensively by more than 86 news outlets. 13% of the reporting is coming from the left, and 57% is coming from the right. If you compare the headlines, you'll start to see some interesting framing emerge, with right-wing outlets celebrating that the future has begun, or highlighting that, with right-leaning alliances, anything is possible. One of my favourite features of theirs is My News Bias. It's basically a fitness tracker, but for news. It tracks my reading habits over time, my trends in political bias, the specific news outlets I read the most, even the specific topics I gravitate towards. It's been really helpful in minimising my personal blind spots. Now, as an impartial news outlet, we're passionate about informing our viewers about bias and helping them to understand how it affects the media they consume. Ground News is very effective at this, showing you exactly how each side of the political divide covers each story you see online. And best of all, we're currently offering viewers 50% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to all of their amazing features like their blind spot feed. This is their biggest discount of the year, so go to ground.news/TLDR, click the QR code here on screen, or use the link in the description to subscribe today.